was 1942, and I would be, every day I would be leaving work at around 3 o'clock to go home and eat and then go to my Army recruiting training at Siena College. And on the way home on the bus, when it stopped at the Milne School, a young girl would get on with a broad smile, white saddle shoes, with a camel's hair coat, who would get on the bus and for a few moments would kibitz with the driver and then move towards the back. Very attractive young lady. I use the word young. So she was 15, but she looked like 18. But anyway, I would look at her and then I'd say, well, that's a very young girl. That would be the end. Here it was after the war, and I asked my mother about available women in the area, and the one name came back up again, the Roosevelt girl. Well, at this point, years had gone by, and she was then about 17, going on 18.
Well, I only really remember him calling me up on the phone and asking me for a date during the week. And I said yes. And this young man walks up the front stairs at 27 Homestead Avenue, which was very unusual because none of us ever used the front stairs. And he walks in, doesn't say anything, he says, I've seen you before. And then he says, okay, and he says, we can't go out until I remember where I've seen you. But anyway, then it suddenly dawned on him I was the girl on the bus from years back.
He had his eye on Ruthie when she was like 16, getting on the bus from school.
That evening, I pretty much made up my mind that this was the gal for me. And from there on, I conducted a Wharton School advertising campaign to win over Ruth Roosevelt.
It's the greatest story ever told. Boy meets girl. Boy loses girl. Boy gets sent to war for 5 years. Boy meets girl again. This time he vows not to lose her. This is the story of Ruth and Leo, an unconventional love story.
Ruth was always busy going out with everybody. She was a popular little girl. She had I don't know how many fraternity pins and what have you. And Leo would drive her many times for dates. Can you imagine?
When I first met him, he was okay for a weeknight date. He wasn't a Saturday night date.
I would drive her to Schenectady. At that time, Howard and Shirley were living there. And I would bring Jenny R. and Bill along to visit. And on one occasion, I drove Ruth over. She condescended to drive in my car. And she went met a chap in Schenectady and went out on a date.
Wait a minute. Did he just say what I think he said?
Never could understand him, that he would drive her to a date with somebody in Schenectady or wherever it was.
A gentleman and a scholar. This was all part of Leo's calculated plan. Armed with his Wharton education and 5 years of Army experience, he waged an all-out war to win the heart of the vibrant and vivacious Ruthie. With an eye on the competition and always keeping his enemies close at hand, Leo would never be far from his target, even if it meant chauffeuring her to dates with others.
So Howard, in the course of the evening, I went with him across the street to get ice cream, and so he said to me, he said, how are things going with you and Ruth? I said, great. So he said, how can you say great? You bring her up to go on a date with Marty Breslau. That was the end of that conversation.
We rarely went out on Saturday nights, I think once.
But why was that?
He just didn't strike me that way, that was all. He was good to go to the Albany Symphony, which in those days met at what was then Philip Livingston Junior High School. And we went to a play or two, but that was the extent of our dating in that sense. And then he suddenly got serious.
Ruth would go out on a date, and when she came in from her date, I was her father confessor or something. She'd come to me and tell me all about her date. And when she came in after a date with Leo, she'd say, I don't know why I go out with him.
But date him she did, and Leo, never one to take no or I can't increase my donation to the Federation this year for an answer, would not quit. Patiently he waits while Ruth, pursued by many suitors, dates and dates and dates.
So, to make a longer story shorter, within about a period of a year or so, I don't know the exact time, I can figure it out naturally, but be it as it may, I would watch her progress in the community, and there was one occasion where I didn't like the guy she went out with, and I told her and called her up and said, you know, I don't think he's the man for you. But that was one of many conversations we had, and in the finale of it all, I had to use my educated background of being a salesman, and one night we're sitting on the back stairs about 1 o'clock in the morning, and at that point I gave her the pep talk on why she should consider that I was the guy for her.
What were your parents' reactions to Leo?
As before we got engaged,
Yeah, as a
oh,
date.
they thought he was a very nice young man.
And then,
That was it. They just thought he was a great young man. And why didn't I like him more? And I don't know. I couldn't answer that. I was too busy having a good time.
and what was the reaction when you announced your engagement?
My mother said, to whom? Because I'd never even mentioned anything serious about Leo or with Leo. And when I came in and told her we were engaged, she was absolutely stunned.
How was your sister's reaction?
To whom? So I guess that was a little embarrassing to Leo, but maybe not. He took it with good grace.
But I guess he's a good salesman. Better than I gave him credit for.
My mother told him many a time, give up, Leo. She doesn't want to go out with you. Give up.
Well, we were kind of sure surprised, actually.
Yeah, because you're talking about opposites. Basically, Leo's
Yeah.
very conservative, very
Yeah.
quiet.
Yeah.
She was very vivacious.
And then we said, Ruthie has to get involved in religion, too, because she was reformed.
The year 1947, October 12th, a warm autumn day. A contract was drawn up and a strategic pact was signed between two influential Albany families. A union like no other had been formed. On this day at Jack's restaurant, Ruth Rosenfeld and Leo Pfaff took their vows and made their promises to honor and cherish each other through sickness and health, and a vow which they took quite seriously, to be fruitful and multiply. Unbeknownst to their wedding guests, the Jewish community worldwide was about to receive an endowment that would eclipse the largest of donations, as the world was populated with 6 children. Quite stunning ones at that, I may add. Firstborn, David Mark. Stephen Edward. Ellen Fay. After a brief break and the successful location of a larger house, Doris Ann and Judith Rebecca. After another short break and an upgrade to an even larger house, Wendy Beth came along. Lastly, requiring as much nurturing as the 6 children, Temple Israel. When we return, a tribute to Ruth and Leo. But first, a preview of tonight's episode of Unsolved Family Mysteries.
Tonight on Unsolved Family Mysteries, we investigate a story that has rocked the community of Albany. A story so shocking that it can't possibly be true. Or can it? The similarities are alarming. The habits all too familiar. The likeness all too eerie. The truth behind Dan Flax. Our investigative reporter Dory Pfaff gets to the bottom of, is this man Leo Pfaff's illegitimate son?
No comment. No comment. Stop the camera.
Tonight on Unsolved Family Mysteries. Don't miss it.